On the evening of the 18th of December 2025, Sandringham received its guests with the particular warmth that the royal household reserves for occasions designed to feel intimate rather than ceremonial. The fires had been lit in the principal rooms since mid-afternoon. The scent of pine from the freshly dressed arrangements mingled with beeswax from the candles positioned along the corridor tables, and the faint sweetness drifting from the kitchens where the seasonal baking had been underway since morning. The orchestra had been placed in the east drawing room at a volume calibrated with the specific expertise of musicians who have spent careers performing in spaces where the music must be present without ever demanding to be noticed. It was, in every visible dimension, an evening constructed for comfort, for the kind of warmth that the royal family offers its inner circle at this time of year, as a reminder that beneath the ceremony and the protocol and the institutional weight of what they collectively represent, there exists something older and less formal, a family, gathering, as families do, around fires and food, and the particular ease of people who have known each other long enough to have stopped performing for one another. That ease, sources who were present confirm, lasted approximately 40 minutes after the first guests arrived. Then Laura Lopes walked in, and everything changed in ways that nobody in that room had been prepared for, and nobody who was present has been able to entirely set aside in the weeks that followed. Before we begin today's royal update, I want to take a quick moment. Many of you watch these videos but haven't subscribed yet, and you don't want to miss the latest developments and fascinating stories from the world of royalty. Subscribing is completely free and keeps you updated as everything unfolds. While you're here, tell us, where are you watching from? Share it in the comments. It's amazing to see viewers joining us from all around the world. There were 11 people positioned with sufficient proximity and attention to qualify as direct witnesses to what occurred over the course of the evening's first significant incident. Their accounts, compiled separately and cross-referenced in the days that followed, are consistent in every detail that matters. They agree on Laura's entrance, the specific quality of her movement through the room that multiple witnesses have described, independently and with a consistency that sources find striking, as different in character from anything they had previously observed from her at occasions of this kind. It was not the practiced ease of someone performing comfort they genuinely feel. It was the forward momentum of someone who has made a decision in advance about what the evening will accomplish and is prepared to be the instrument of that accomplishment. It was, one witness said, with the careful precision of someone choosing their words with full awareness of their weight, the confidence of someone who believes the room already belongs to them and is simply waiting for the room to catch up. Princess Charlotte had been present in the gathering for approximately 30 minutes before the incident occurred. Those 30 minutes are worth reconstructing with care because they establish with specific and humanizing clarity exactly what was destroyed when Laura's words arrived. Charlotte had been moving through the room with the natural ease of a child comfortable in a space she has known all her life, pausing to speak with the other children present with the particular attentiveness that those who know her well describe as one of her most distinctive qualities, a genuine interest in the person in front of her that communicates itself immediately and without effort. She had made a 7-year-old laugh at something near the fireplace. She had helped a younger child navigate the geography of a room whose scale was clearly overwhelming them. She had caught her mother's eye across the width of the gathering and exchanged the kind of smile that passes between a parent and child who understand each other well, quick, warm, and carrying within it a whole conversation that required no words. Several witnesses have since recalled that moment specifically. Not because it was remarkable in itself, but because of what followed it and what the contrast between those two moments reveals about the specific and personal nature of the damage that was done. Laura's insult did not arrive with the bluntness of someone who has stopped calculating. It arrived in the register that the most deliberate provocations always choose conversational in its tone, almost casual in its delivery, wrapped in the faintest architecture of a smile that gave it the surface plausibility of a remark operating somewhere in the ambiguous territory between observation and offense. It was precisely that ambiguity that made it so effective and so difficult for those who witnessed it to respond to in the moment. The words were quiet enough that guests at the gathering's outer edges caught only the aftermath, the sudden and complete cessation of the ambient sound that had been filling the room for the preceding 40 minutes, the orchestra's notes softening to a confused and uncertain halt. The specific quality of stillness that descends on a space when something has occurred that every person present understands cannot be taken back and cannot be pretended away. Charlotte's response was a single visible reaction. Her eyes widened before her composure reassembled itself with a speed and a completeness that witnesses describe as the most affecting detail of the entire incident. She was 10 years old. She should not have needed that composure. She had it anyway. And the grace of its arrival, in the specific circumstances that required it, was something that several witnesses have said they found more difficult to absorb than the insult that made it necessary. In the corner of the east drawing room, at a distance of approximately 8 meters from the point of the incident, Princess Anne stood very still. She had heard every word. She had watched Charlotte's eyes widen and watched the composure return and watched the room attempt to exhale and find that it could not quite manage to do so. She did not move toward Laura. She did not raise her voice or alter her expression or produce any of the visible signals that might have given the room a framework for processing what had just occurred. She simply stood and observed and began the particular interior assessment that those who have spent decades in her proximity have learned to recognize as considerably more dangerous than any visible response she has ever produced. The insult to Charlotte was not, Anne already understood, the only thing that had happened at Sandringham that evening. A palace insider was moving through the corridor behind the east drawing room toward her with a device in their hand and an expression on their face that she had not yet seen, but that those who encountered them en route have since described with identical words: urgent, alarmed, and absolutely certain that what they were carrying needed to reach Princess Anne without another moment's delay. The Cambridge Lovers Not Tiara has a history that begins in 1914, and that those who know it well describe not as the history of an object, but as the history of a feeling. Queen Mary commissioned it in the final summer before the First World War altered everything about the world that had produced it, and from the moment of its creation, it carried the particular weight of things made at the edge of one era and carried forward into another that could not have been fully imagined by the hands that crafted it. It passed through the royal collection across the decades with the kind of institutional continuity that makes certain objects feel less like possessions and more like presences, until the chapter of its history that gave it the specific and irreplaceable emotional weight that made what Laura Lopes did with it on the evening of the 18th of December 2025, something that those who understand that weight can only describe in a single word: desecration. Diana wore it first in 1981 and wore it across the years of her marriage with a frequency and a visibility that made it one of the most recognizable pieces in the royal collection and one of the most personally associated with her image, her bearing, and the particular quality of luminous public presence that made her the figure she became. After her death, it returned to the royal collection where it existed in the particular state of sacred preservation that those who worked in proximity to it describe as making it feel different from the pieces around it, not merely historically significant, emotionally inhabited. When Catherine began wearing it, the choice was understood by everyone with institutional knowledge as a deliberate and respectful assumption of a symbolic continuity whose weight Catherine had earned through the specific quality of her own relationship with Diana's legacy and with the family whose grief she had entered and honored. The tiara was not available for casual handling. Everyone who had ever worked within the royal household understood this without needing to be told. It was the kind of understanding that the institution transmits not through written protocol, but through the particular atmosphere that surrounds certain objects and that communicates their status to anyone paying sufficient attention. Laura Lopes had been paying a different kind of attention. The private room at Sandringham, where the try-on occurred, was not a room she had been directed toward or accompanied to by any member of the household staff. She had reached it through the particular navigational confidence of someone who has spent enough time in a space to have mapped it beyond the areas she has been formally shown. The tiara had been temporarily housed there as part of the logistical management of the gathering's more sensitive items, a standard procedure whose details were known only to a small number of household staff and whose security depended on an assumption of trust that the events of the evening were about to permanently retire. What occurred in that room has been reconstructed from the account of the palace insider who witnessed it, and from the photograph that witness captured with the instinctive response of someone who understood immediately that what they were seeing required documentation. Laura removed the tiara from its case with the ease of someone who had either not considered what the act communicated or had considered it fully and proceeded regardless. She wore it for a period that the witness estimates at several minutes. And the expression the photograph captured was the detail that sources who have since been shown the image return to without exception. It was not the tentative and slightly abashed expression of innocent curiosity caught in an impulsive moment. It was settled, composed, the expression of someone occupying a position they have imagined occupying and finding that the reality matches the imagination in ways that please them. The photograph reached Princess Anne through a chain whose speed sources describe as the most telling element of the entire sequence. The palace insider transferred it to the first intermediary within minutes of Laura leaving the room. The first intermediary reached the second within 10 minutes of that. The second intermediary reached Anne's personal aide within 7 minutes of receiving it. The entire journey from private room to Anne's possession took 31 minutes. The speed was not the product of any coordinated plan or pre-established protocol. It was the product of instinct shared across every person in the chain, the instinct of people who had spent their professional lives learning to recognize the things that could not wait and who understood, without needing to discuss it, that what they were passing between them was precisely one of those things. Anne viewed the photograph once. The 90 seconds that followed have been described by the aide present in the outer corridor during that period as the most concentrated stillness they had witnessed in years of close proximity to a woman for whom stillness is a habitual register. What was happening inside that stillness was the integration of the photograph's content with everything Anne already knew, the months of intelligence regarding Laura's escalating pattern of conduct, the specific institutional knowledge of what the tiara represented and what its unauthorized wearing communicated, and the recognition that crystallized in those 90 seconds with the particular clarity of a conclusion that has been approached from multiple directions simultaneously and has finally arrived from all of them at once. The insult to Charlotte and the tiara incident were not two separate events connected only by the coincidence of the same evening. They were two expressions of a single strategy, and the strategy had not materialized from nowhere. It had been enabled. Consistently, quietly, and with a tolerance that had now made this evening possible, Anne's instructions when she emerged from that stillness were delivered in 4 sentences. Those present in the corridor described the tone as the one she reserves for things she will not revisit. The 48 hours that followed would demonstrate precisely what that tone has always meant. Princess Anne's response did not begin with confrontation. It began with paper. Within 12 hours of the Sandringham gathering concluding, Anne had commissioned a formal written record of both incidents compiled from the 11 witness accounts, whose consistency across every significant detail made the resulting document something that no subsequent attempt at reframing could meaningfully challenge. The photographic evidence was incorporated. The chain of custody was documented. The timeline was reconstructed with a precision that left no gap available for alternative interpretation. The completed record was submitted through the specific institutional channel that creates permanent and unassailable documentation, regardless of any subsequent effort by any party to minimize, dispute, or quietly allow the institutional memory of an incident to soften with time and distance. Anne had not chosen that channel by accident. She had chosen it because she understood, with the clarity of someone who has spent a lifetime navigating the difference between incidents that are managed and incidents that are recorded, that what had occurred at Sandringham on the 18th of December required the latter with a finality that she intended to be absolute. The meeting with the Lord Chamberlain's office on the morning of the 19th of December lasted 40 minutes. Its agenda has not been formally disclosed. What has been confirmed by sources with direct knowledge of its consequences is that the adjustments to Laura Lopes's access and participation at royal occasions and royal residences that followed in the days immediately after were neither gradual nor ambiguous. They were implemented with the particular institutional efficacy of decisions that have been made completely rather than provisionally, and they communicated to everyone positioned to observe their effect exactly what they were intended to communicate. Not a warning, a conclusion. The difference between those two things is the difference between a door left ajar and a door whose lock has been changed. Anne had changed the lock. The meeting with Camilla took place on the 21st of December in a private setting chosen with the specific intention of ensuring that what was communicated could not be subsequently reframed as ambiguous in any of its essential dimensions. Anne presented the documentary record. She presented the photographic evidence. She communicated the institutional consequences already in motion and the additional consequences available to her should the pattern of conduct she had documented continue in any form. And then she delivered the statement of expectation, whose specific content sources have declined to reproduce verbatim, but whose character they describe with complete consistency. It was, they say, the kind of statement that does not invite response, because it has not been framed as a position open to negotiation. It has been framed as a reality that the person receiving it is being given the professional courtesy of understanding in advance of its full implementation. Camilla left the room without speaking. The silence she carried out with her was described by the one witness present as the silence of someone who has just understood something they cannot ununderstand. Prince William received Anne's full briefing on the 22nd of December. Those present describe his response as immediate, unambiguous, and delivered in the particular register he reserves for matters he has already fully processed before being asked about them. He had known something significant had occurred at Sandringham before Anne's briefing reached him. He had not known its full dimensions. When those dimensions were laid before him, he asked 2 questions, received 2 answers, and issued a single communication through his private office before the briefing had concluded. That communication was not public. It did not need to be. Those who received it understood its meaning with the complete clarity William had intended, and those who subsequently learned of its existence and its contents have described it as the moment the institutional weight of the most powerful household in the next generation of the monarchy was placed, without qualification or condition, behind everything Anne had set in motion. There was no space remaining after that communication for any alternative narrative about what had occurred, what it meant, or what its consequences would be. Anne had built that space closed from the first document she commissioned. William had sealed it permanently. In the days following the Sandringham gathering, Princess Charlotte returned to the rhythms of her life, with the particular resilience of a child who has been raised inside an institution that demands more of its youngest members than most adults would consider reasonable, and who has, in the quiet and unhurried way of someone absorbing lessons whose full significance will only reveal itself across years rather than days, already begun to meet those demands with a grace that is entirely and specifically her own. She did not know the complete dimensions of what had been set in motion on her behalf in the 48 hours following the gathering. She did not need to. What she knew, in the way that children know things that adults have not explicitly told them, was that the people who loved her had seen what happened and had not looked away, and had not decided that the smooth continuation of an evening was worth more than the dignity of a 10-year-old girl who had done nothing to deserve what had been directed at her. For a child navigating the particular complexity of growing up inside the most scrutinized family on earth, that knowledge was not a peripheral comfort. It was the central one, the one that makes everything else navigable. Catherine's response, upon receiving the full account from William, carried the quality that those present during the conversation have described as the clearest expression of her priorities they have witnessed in years of close proximity to the Princess of Wales. She did not respond institutionally. She did not reach for the language of protocol or procedure or the careful framing that senior royals deploy when they wish to communicate feeling while maintaining the composure that their position requires. She communicated to the palace officials present with a directness that left no interpretive ambiguity of any kind. Her daughter's well-being would not be subordinated to any institutional consideration under any circumstances, and any future arrangement that placed Charlotte in proximity to the dynamics that had produced the Sandringham incident would be met with a response from the Wales household that those officials should factor into their planning with complete seriousness. One aide who was present described it afterward as the most unambiguous statement of maternal priority they had encountered from a senior royal in their professional lifetime. It was not delivered with anger. It was delivered with the particular calm of someone who has decided something completely and is communicating the decision rather than seeking consensus about it. The formal institutional aftermath settled into place across the final days of December 2025, with the quiet permanence of consequences that have been properly grounded and properly documented, and therefore require no ongoing maintenance to remain in effect. Laura's access to royal residences and royal occasions was restructured in ways whose practical dimensions were immediately apparent to everyone affected, and whose underlying rationale required no explanation, because the documentation Anne had commissioned in the hours following the gathering made it self-evident to anyone with access to the relevant record. The guidance governing the handling of Diana's personal artifacts was formally codified in language, whose specificity ensured that what had occurred in the private room at Sandringham could not occur again, regardless of who occupied the relevant roles in the years ahead. And Camilla, navigating the personal and institutional aftermath of her meeting with Anne, withdrew from several scheduled engagements in the week before Christmas in a manner that those monitoring her public calendar noted without comment and understood completely. The tiara was returned to its place in the royal collection on the morning of the 19th of December by a member of Anne's household staff who had been entrusted with its physical transfer, and who completed that transfer with the particular care of someone who understands that what they are handling is not simply an object of historical and material value, but the preserved and specific memory of a woman whose absence continues to shape the emotional landscape of the institution in ways that no formal record fully captures. It sits there now as it has always sat, in the particular stillness of things that have been through too much to be easily disturbed, and that carry within them the specific gravity of lives lived at a scale most people only ever observe from the outside. Diana's legacy was not diminished by what occurred at Sandringham on the 18th of December 2025. It was, in the 48 hours that followed, actively and permanently defended by the woman best positioned to defend it, and least likely to have done so for any reason other than the one she has always operated from. Not recognition, not institutional advantage, not personal animosity toward those whose conduct had made her response necessary. Simply the understanding, held with the quiet and absolute conviction of a lifetime service, that some things are worth protecting completely, and that the people and the memories that fall within that category will always, as long as she has the capacity to act, be protected.